What if this is us? I'm cursed with optimism. But as the smouldering cinders of last week burned themselves to charcoal, and our president, flanked by his podgy, unkempt generals, wailed war talk of an insurrection, and social media was overrun with stirring renditions of the national anthem and images of people sweeping the broken shards of debris from a week of shame, I felt shortchanged. I cannot allow my optimism to blind me like the cataracts to reality. In a slight elevation of his usual monotone, the president informed us that an unnamed Zuma and a dirty dozen of saboteurs wrought havoc on our nation. In an attack on our democracy, they targeted road arteries, ports, oil refineries and strategic key points. But their attempted resurrection had come to naught. The woke coterie of TV commentators berated us with stories of how what we had witnessed is the poor, the destitute and the unvaccinated taking food to which they were entitled given the long COVID shutdowns, gross income inequality and insufficient government support. My fellow squad of optimists tell us how the country has come together, how people of all races have manned the barricades, protected the malls, how taxi associations have sought out the fugitives, and how, with brooms in hand, by sweeping the distraction out of supermarket aisles, we will rebuild South Africa. Channeling a national therapist, our president assured us that this past week was not us. This is not who we are as a people, he said. But what happens if he's wrong? Isn't it time to take a really good look at ourselves in the mirror and realize this is exactly us? This is exactly who we have become as a nation. What concerns me is not that a kleptocratic former president and his criminal cohort attempted to overthrow a democratically elected government. What doesn't worry me is that sadly Pick and Pay and ShopRite checkers were robbed of bread and milk and eggs. What does concern me most is the image of long lines of orderly, disciplined, luxury and semi-luxury vehicles waiting peacefully in line for their chance to loot the macro distribution centre in KwaZulu-Natal. These cars and their parting jubilant occupants were not the poor, the hungry, the destitute. These were middle class and upper middle class fat cats willing to steal because order and law and society had simply broken down. After 1994, the first democratic elections, while executive director of the Independent Electoral Commission, I employed the services of a private detective to track down the assets of the commission, which had been stolen, looted and plundered during our first democratic vote. The detective taught me a very valuable lesson. 20% of the population will always steal, he explained. 20% of the population will never steal. But the remaining 60% of people will steal and rob and loot if they are presented with an opportunity where they're likely to get away with it, when law and order has broken down, and where criminality has become an acceptable norm of society. When you live in a society with no consequence, when theft is all around you, when those in power are never brought to justice, then the fertile ground is ploughed for anarchy. Permission is granted to everyone to say, if he can, why can't I? If the police stand back and watch the looting, swearing helplessly at the criminals, but allowing the chaos to engulf the nation, then you are guaranteed crime with no consequence. In Rwanda, ordinary citizens turned on their neighbors and became murderers for a month. They were not murderers before, and they were not murderers after. Similarly, in Nazi Germany, in places like Lithuania, where most of us in the Jewish community come from, Jews were killed by their neighbors who did not kill before and did not kill again. But the climate was created where there was no consequence for your crime, where criminality was the norm, where everyone was given permission to be part of the mob rather than the one who stands up against the tide. In these circumstances, Ordinary, law-abiding, tummy-filled South Africans took to the street to steal 67,000 rand couches that don't fit into their homes, to loot 75-inch TVs that can't fit into their cars, and to line up orderly and peacefully, waiting to loot and plunder their local mall and store. So, Mr. President, this was not an aberration. This was us. This was the real South Africa that we created. A country with no consequence. A country that the apartheid apologists warned us about. And so it's time to look in the mirror and realize that the real South Africa just punched us directly in the face.
Yourself.